The Midnight Whistler, the unidentified entity heard across 3 continents, the Midnight Whistler. Across the world, there are mysteries that leave behind questions, shadows, and cold chills that refuse to fade with time. But every once in a while, a story emerges that is more than a strange event. It becomes a global whisper shared in fear. A phenomenon so unsettling, so inexplicable, that it forces entire communities to stay awake at night, listening for something they do not want to hear. For years, residents in remote towns across South America, Eastern Europe, and parts of Southeast Asia claim to hear the same sound. A single, slow, human-like whistle echoing through the darkness at exactly 12:03 a.m. Not a bird, not the wind, not machinery, but a whistle that seemed to belong to someone or something. The unsettling part? No matter the country, no matter the season, witnesses described it the same way. The whistle started far away, almost gentle. It grew louder, closer, as if someone was walking toward their homes. And then, just before reaching the door, it stopped. Completely. Instantly. As if the presence behind it was standing right outside, choosing not to enter. Recordings exist, shared online by terrified locals. Scientists attempted to analyze them. Governments quietly dismissed them. But the mystery only deepened when 3 separate recordings from 3 different continents matched exactly down to identical frequency patterns. Whatever the sound was, it wasn't natural, and it wasn't human. This is the haunting tale of the Midnight Whistler, an unexplained global phenomenon that still leaves people afraid to open their windows at night. The first night, in Valparaiso. The story begins in the coastal hills of Valparaiso, Chile, in a quiet neighborhood where the ocean breeze usually carries nothing but the distant echo of ships and street musicians. But on a night of June 4th, 2012, something different drifted through the air, something no one in the city had ever heard before. At exactly 12:03 a.m., a local fisherman named Ernesto Fuentes awoke to a sound so faint he thought he was dreaming. A long, slow whistle. Only 4 notes, repeated with perfect rhythm, as if someone were deliberately signaling in the dark. It wasn't sharp. It wasn't rushed. It was calm, controlled, intentional. At first, Ernesto ignored it. Strange noises weren't uncommon in the harbor. But this whistle didn't fade. It grew louder, closer. Ernesto sat up in bed, confused by the precise cadence of the sound. He described it later as almost friendly, but too steady to be human. He walked toward his window and peeked through the blinds, expecting to see someone standing outside. Instead, the street was empty, not even a wandering dog or passing car. Still the whistle continued. His wife, Marisol, woke next. She whispered, trembling, "Is someone calling us?" Ernesto couldn't answer. Something about the sound felt wrong. Too consistent, too smooth, as if it were gliding through the air without any breath behind it. Then came the moment Ernesto would never forget. The whistle suddenly shifted direction. Instead of drifting in from the street, it now seemed to come from the back of the house, where there were no roads, no hills, no access, only a steep drop covered in thick vegetation. Something or someone was moving silently through that impossible terrain. The whistle stopped. The night grew painfully still. And right as Ernesto reached for the back door, the whistle resumed, this time on the roof. He froze. There were no footsteps, no climbing sounds, no weight shifting on the tiles. Just the whistle for notes, calm and slow, as if whoever or whatever made it did not need to climb at all, as if it had simply appeared above them. The sound lingered for nearly 5 minutes. Then, with a suddenness that felt deliberate, it ended. The next morning, the Fuentes family searched their roof. No footprints, no debris, no sign of an animal or intruder. But they weren't the only ones who heard it. That same night, 12 households throughout the Valparaiso hillside reported a similar experience. A whistle that moved, circled, approached, and vanished. Authorities blamed wind patterns. Locals blamed restless spirits. But no one could explain how the whistle traveled so intentionally or why it always began at 12:03 a.m. What happened in Valparaiso was only the beginning. The echoes of Oravita. Nearly a year after the strange events in Valparaiso, the quiet Romanian town of Oravita became the next location marked by the midnight whistler. Nestled among the dense forests of the Carpathian Mountains, Oravita is the kind of place where mysteries tend to linger in the mist, but nothing had ever prepared its people for what they would hear. It began on March 11th, 2013, when a 17-year-old student named Anna Maria Stanko walked home late from a school theater rehearsal. The roads were empty. The trees around her creaked softly in the wind. Then, as she passed an old stone well near the edge of town, she heard it. A whistle. Slow. Measured. For notes, just like in Chile. Anna Maria stopped walking. The whistle repeated, this time sounding closer, too close. She spun around, expecting to confront a neighbor or a prankster hiding in the shadows. But the street was deserted. The whistle came again. This time, however, it wasn't coming from behind her. It was directly above. Instinctively, she looked up into the branches of a towering beech tree. Nothing. No movement, no perched animal, no figure hiding in the leaves. Yet the sound was unmistakably overhead, as if someone invisible were sitting just above her, watching. Anna Maria ran. Her footsteps echoed through the empty street, and each time she slowed to catch her breath, the whistle returned, following her, matching her pace, closing in whenever she paused. It never sounded rushed. It never sounded threatening. Just patient, disturbingly patient. When she finally reached her home and slammed the door shut, the whistle didn't fade into the distance the way a normal sound would. Instead, it stopped abruptly like someone flipping a switch. Her father, hearing her panic, called the local police. 2 officers were dispatched to walk the road she had taken. They found no one, but they did report something strange. The sound of leaves rustling in the tall beech tree, despite the fact that the night air was completely still. The next night, at precisely 12:03 a.m., the whistle returned, not only to the road, but throughout Oravita. More than 40 residents heard it. Some said it moved through the forest, weaving between the trees. Others swore it passed over rooftops like a drifting presence searching for someone. A few elderly villagers whispered an old Carpathian legend. The one who whistles walks without feet. On the 3rd night, a man named Stefan Lepescu captured a recording on his phone. When he replayed it the next morning, he made a startling discovery. The whistle in his recording was not just similar to the one from Chile. It was identical, down to each frequency spike. 2 locations, 2 continents, the same sound. Still, the Romanian authorities insisted it was nothing more than wind, even though no meteorological patterns matched what the residents described. But the people of Oravita knew better. Something was moving through their town at night. Something that traveled silently, observed patiently, and announced itself with the same eerie whistle that haunted Valparaiso. And soon, it would travel even farther. The sleepless village of Kampong Siraya. Thousands of miles away from Romania, in the humid lowlands of Kampong Siraya, a small Malaysian village surrounded by rice fields and thick jungle, the midnight whistler reappeared, this time bringing with it a wave of fear that would change the village's routines for months. It happened on September 2nd, 2013. The night was unusually quiet. The cicadas had gone silent. The frogs in the irrigation canals weren't croaking, and even the wind had stilled, conditions that the elders later described as a warning the jungle was holding its breath. At 12:03 a.m., the whistle began. Villagers described it as soft at first, echoing across the open paddies like someone standing far beyond the tree-line. But in Kampong Siraya, sound carries strangely. The villagers were used to distant noises fading into the forests. This sound, however, did the opposite. It grew closer, not gradually but in jumps. A farmer named Pak Idris was sitting alone on his stilted porch, unable to sleep, when he heard the whistle shift from distant fields to the very edge of his home. He said the change wasn't slow or natural. It was instantaneous, as if the source had teleported several hundred meters in a split second. Then something even more disturbing happened. The whistle began mimicking the rhythm of breathing, slow, steady inhalations broken by perfect pauses. But Idris insisted it didn't sound like a person breathing. It sounded like something pretending to breathe, copying a pattern it didn't fully understand. Across the village, dogs began whining and crawling under houses. Chickens fluttered uncontrollably inside their coops. Infants woke screaming without reason. Mothers covered their children's ears. Yet the whistle seemed to drift inside the wooden walls like fog entering through cracks. At 12:05 a.m., the village shaman, Makte, stepped outside, clutching her prayer beads. She later recounted that the whistle abruptly stopped the moment she crossed her threshold, as if whatever was producing it was watching her. The silence that followed was unbearable. Even the insects refused to resume their nightly chorus. Then, from directly above the village, the whistle returned, louder than before. Several villagers saw it. The tall grass in the central clearing pressed downward in a perfectly circular shape, as if a massive but invisible weight were settling there. The whistle echoed from the center of that circle, vibrating the air in a way that made their skin prickle and their teeth ache. Makte whispered, "It is not walking. It is drifting." Just as suddenly as it began, the whistle ceased. The circular impression in the grass lifted, returning to normal as if nothing had been there at all. The next morning, an elder brought his radio to the clearing and attempted to pick up strange frequencies. Instead of static, he detected a pattern he had never heard, an oscillating tone that matched neither wildlife nor machinery. While a local student uploaded the audio to the internet, a chilling revelation emerged. The sound patterns were a perfect match to the recordings from Valparaiso and Oravida. 3 different locations, 3 different cultures, 3 different climates, one identical whistling entity. And now, for the first time, it seemed to be growing bolder, interacting with its surroundings, appearing in visible ways, and showing behavior that felt curious. But curiosity is not always harmless. The disappearance at Lake Wendigo. By the time the midnight whistler reached North America, its pattern had already begun to form. 12:03 a.m. For slow notes, a presence that moved without footsteps and watched. But at Lake Wendigo, deep in northern Minnesota, the phenomenon escalated into something darker. And for the first time, it left behind more than audio, fear, or rumors. It left behind a missing person. It was the night of January 14th, 2014, when Elias Brandt, a 26-year-old wildlife photographer, set up a small cabin near the frozen shoreline. His aim was simple: capture the rare, snowy owl migration. The lake was surrounded by dense pine forest, with no nearby towns, no traffic, and no reason for human noises to echo across the ice at night. That isolation would soon become a nightmare. The whistle begins. Elias had been reviewing photos by lantern light when he heard it, a slow, haunting whistle gliding across the frozen lake. For notes, familiar even to those who had never heard of the global phenomenon, he wrote in his journal, found later inside the cabin, a whistle across the lake. Steady, too steady, no wind right now. Feels wrong. At first he assumed it was ice shifting, but ice doesn't whistle, and certainly not in repeating melodies. Within minutes, the sound moved, not across the surface, but underneath it. The whistle began echoing from beneath the frozen lake, vibrating through the ice as though something enormous were gliding under Elias's feet. The lantern's flame flickered violently. His camera, left on the windowsill, shook enough to tip over. Elias stepped outside to investigate, a decision that would later puzzle investigators and terrify the public. Footsteps in the snow that weren't his. Elias didn't make it far from the cabin before he noticed them. Footprints, not his, not animals. Too long, too narrow, and spaced in a way that suggested something had been sliding rather than walking. But the snow was untouched around them. No approach, no trail, just a line of bizarre impressions leading straight to the lake's center. The whistle came again from below the ice. Closer this time. A nearby motion-triggered camera captured what happened next. The final recording. At exactly 12:03 a.m., Elias walked toward the lake, following the strange footprints. The whistle grew so loud it seemed to shake the camera's frame. As he stepped onto the ice, the sound stopped completely, and the forest fell silent. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then the ice beneath him bulged upward, as if something massive were pushing from below. A crack echoed. Elias turned to run, but before he could reach the shore, the camera recorded something impossible. A tall, shadow-like shape rising from the ice without breaking it. There was no form, no clear edges, just a distorted, shimmering silhouette, like a mirage standing upright in the snow. And though it had no face, the camera's audio captured a faint, almost conversational exhale, followed by the 4-note whistle. The video ended abruptly when the camera toppled. Elias was never found. Search teams discovered his footprints leading onto the lake, but none leading back. The ice was solid. No break, no hole, no cracks deep enough for a person to fall through. It was as if Elias had simply vanished into the air. His journal remained open on the cabin desk. His coat still hung near the door. His lantern was still warm when rescuers arrived. But Elias was gone. The recording went viral within days. Scientists argued it was a shadow, an optical effect, a hoax. But when audio engineers examined the whistle from the video, they confirmed the worst. It matched perfectly the recordings from Chile, Romania, and Malaysia. Whatever the midnight whistler was, it had crossed another ocean, and it was no longer just observing. The frequency that shouldn't exist. After the disappearance of Elias Brandt, attention turned to the one thing the midnight whistler always left behind: its sound. Scientists, skeptics, universities, and even classified agencies analyzed the recordings. What they discovered wasn't just unusual, it was impossible. The most notable research came from Dr. Lena Korhonen, a Finnish acoustics specialist working at a private Scandinavian laboratory. She studied the 4 main recordings: Chile, Romania, Malaysia, and Minnesota, and quickly noticed something no one else had. The whistle contained 2 overlapping frequencies, one audible to humans and one far below the threshold of human hearing. Not subbass, not environmental rumble, something much stranger. A frequency with no natural source. The hidden frequency pulsed at 17.17 hertz. This was alarming because 17 hertz is very close to the range known as the fear frequency, a vibration that affects the human nervous system, causing feelings of being watched, panic, dread, hallucinations of shadows or figures, nausea, sleep paralysis, sudden chills. It was the same frequency produced in abandoned buildings, old engines, and failing ventilation systems, but those sources are chaotic and inconsistent. The whistler's frequency was precise, perfectly stable, deliberately controlled. Nothing in nature produces a tone like this, Dr. Korhonen wrote. Nothing human can produce it either, not without specialized equipment. The idea that an entity could emit such a frequency was terrifying. But the next discovery was worse. The hidden pattern in the whistle. When Korhonen visualized the sound wave using a spectrogram, she found something chilling embedded in the frequency. A shape, not random noise, not natural distortion, but a repeated, symmetrical structure that resembled a ring with 4 inner arcs, positioned like marks on a compass. Each whistle contained this shape, burned into the frequency like a signature. When she overlaid recordings from all 4 countries, the shapes aligned perfectly, forming one complete symbol. A circle with 4 descending lines, like a sound made by something that understood direction, distance, and geometry. It is trying to communicate, she wrote, or is marking where it has been. But then came the most unsettling part. The shape wasn't just a pattern. It moved. Each new recording showed the inner arcs rotating clockwise by 1 degree, as if counting down, or tracking something, or approaching something. Korhonen published none of this. She only confided in a few colleagues. And then, on April 2nd, 2015, she abruptly resigned from her position, citing severe stress and recurring auditory disturbances. The last email she ever sent before cutting ties with her academic peers contained a single line. Every night at 12:03, I hear the whistle now. Her whereabouts today are unknown. She left no forwarding address, no new employment, no trace of a normal departure. Her neighbors reported hearing a faint four-note whistle the night before she vanished. And then the whistler changed its pattern. For the first time since the phenomenon began, people across the world reported the whistle occurring twice in a single night. Once at 12:03 a.m. and once at 3:12 a.m., exactly 3 hours and 9 minutes later. Scientists tried to decode the meaning of the second time. Religious groups called it a sign. Online communities claimed it was a countdown. Authorities refused to comment. But survivors who heard it described the same terrifying feeling. The first whistle tells you it's near. The second one tells you it has found something. And whatever the whistler was seeking, it wasn't done searching. When the world finally looked up, by late 2016, the Midnight Whistler had transformed from an obscure internet mystery into a global fear. But until then, every encounter had occurred in isolated regions, forests, villages, mountains, coastlines, places where the unexplained can hide in the dark and slip away unnoticed. That changed on October 19th, 2016. For the first time, the Whistler appeared in a major city. The night the skyline went silent. It happened in Osaka, Japan, one of the busiest, brightest, loudest cities in the world. At 12:03 a.m., hundreds of thousands of people were still awake, eating, traveling, working, watching late-night TV. The city never rests. But on this night, something strange happened. The neon signs flickered, the rooftops vibrated, and the wind suddenly stopped dead in a city where the breeze never sleeps. Then came the whistle, for calm, steady notes, echoing not from the streets, not from the alleys, not from the harbor, but from above. Dozens of people on balconies and rooftops testified to the same terrifying sight. A distortion in the sky, a ripple, a shape that wasn't a shape, like heat haze, but moving deliberately, gliding between skyscrapers with liquid smoothness. Security cameras captured it only as a blur, visible for less than half a second at a time. Each clip showed the same impossible phenomenon. A tall, vertical shimmer drifting silently through the air, leaving no heat signature, no shadow, no reflection. And each time the figure passed, electronic ads on the high-rises fizzled and died. The whistle that should have deformed buildings. Acoustic labs later reviewed footage from a night. What they discovered stunned them. The whistle reverberated through Osaka's skyline with the intensity of a subwoofer larger than any concert arena. Yet nothing broke. No windows shattered. No structures shook apart. One engineer wrote, "It resonated through space, not air. The sound traveled without pressure. That isn't physics, it's intention." The idea that the whistler's sound moved on its own path, ignoring obstacles, ignoring walls, ignoring matter, changed everything. The entity paused and looked down. Witnesses on upper floors of the Abeno Harukas Tower swore that the shimmering shape stopped directly outside the 53rd floor. It didn't drift. It didn't flicker. It hovered, perfectly still in the air. Some said it leaned closer. Others said the room grew colder, yet the windows didn't fog. And every witness agreed on this chilling detail. The whistle stopped, but something else replaced it. A soft, slow inhalation, as if the entity were breathing in, smelling the air, smelling them. Several people fainted. 3 experienced cardiac tremors. 1 man suffered a seizure. Hospitals across Osaka recorded a spike in panic attacks at exactly 12:03 a.m. And then it vanished. At 12:08 a.m., all at once. The distortion blinked out. The neon signs reignited. The wind returned. The city resumed breathing. But Osaka would not forget. The government issued no statement. The footage was quietly taken down. Social media accounts that posted videos experienced mass deletion within hours. People who spoke about the event said they were contacted by city safety representatives and urged to avoid spreading panic. But the damage was done. For the first time, the world realized. The Midnight Whistler did not avoid populated places. It simply hadn't chosen to visit one until now. The countdown reaches 0. 2 weeks after Osaka, researchers monitoring global recordings noticed the spectrogram symbol. The circle with 4 arcs had completed a full rotation. Then, on November 2nd, something happened that froze the blood of everyone following the phenomenon. The Whistler did not sound at 12:03 a.m. Not in Chile, not in Romania, not in Malaysia, not in Minnesota, not anywhere. For the first time in 4 years, the world had silence. Some hoped it was over, but the silence didn't feel like safety. It felt like a breath being held, long and deliberate, waiting, watching, marking. Whatever the midnight whistler is, wherever it came from, it has not vanished. It has simply grown quiet, the way a predator grows quiet when it has finally found what it was looking for. A whisper that never truly leaves. The world is filled with mysteries, strange lights in the sky, haunted places, unexplained disappearances. But very few mysteries travel. Very few appear in multiple continents, across cultures and climates, leaving behind no footprints except a sound. The Midnight Whistler is more than a story. It is a reminder that the world is still wild, still unknown, still capable of producing something that science cannot categorize and fear cannot fully explain. If you ever find yourself awake at 12:03 a.m., listening to the quiet around you, and you hear a slow, deliberate 4-note whistle drifting through the darkness, remember the stories you heard tonight, and ask yourself, is it the wind? Is it your imagination? Or is the whistler marking your location next? If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the Mystery Vault, and leave a comment telling us what you think the Midnight Whistler really is. Your engagement helps us uncover more mysteries from the deepest shadows of our world. Until next time, keep your doors locked, your lights low, and your ears open.